So we've looked at functions. We've been looking at functions for a little bit right now. And so let's talk about something related to functions. We understand that functions encloses logic, and then we can return something or do some computing inside of this structure, and then we can return a result and so forth. Okay. So if you look at this function here, it's very simple. So we say fun, add, and then we pass two parameters. Okay. So A and B. And then we expect to return an integer. And this integer is going to be the sum of A plus B. So if you were to call this function, you would pass in an int A, says 10, and B another 10. Then the result would be 20 because we're returning A plus B, which in this case 10 plus 10. Kotlin has a more succinct way of creating functions such as this, or any kind of function really. But let's start small. What I'm talking about is a simplification of a function like this into something like this. Now, if you look at this, it looks really strange and scary, but no worry, it's not that bad. This is what we call a lambda. What is a lambda expression? Well, a lambda expression is a shorter way of describing a function. So this is exactly the same function we had before I showed you earlier, except now we're using a lambda expression. You can see here what we're doing is we're saying val sum, so it's just like a variable, and then we are attaching it to a lambda. So in this case here, we're passing first two integers, again, as you see there, and then we have that arrow that says that we will be expecting to receive an int value, and then we have the actual parameters that we're going to be finding or sending, right? Arguments in this case that we're going to be passing in, and then we have the result, A plus B. So essentially, this is what we have. We have val sum, that's the variable, and then we have the type, in this case, the type of this lambda, this function, that doesn't have any name. And then we have the parameters we're going to be passing, which in this case, A and B. And we could have added or attached the types to A and B, the parameters, but lambda in this case will infer from the types that we're passing and the return type, as you see there, that these two will have to be integers. And of course, the body of a lambda. So the lambda starts where we have those curly braces. Okay, so the body there is where we will say return something. So what is that we can return? A plus B. There are many advantages for using lambdas because, as you can see, it's way easier for us to just look at val sum as an expression and we can use it right away. Okay. Of course, there are many other advantages to using lambda, but I just want to start slowly so you can get used to this idea, because at first it's very strange to look at this syntax, but just marvel at how this looks. Very simple. We have the variable, we have the types, we have the parameters, and we have a body all in one line, and there you have it. So here is the sum function that we've talked about. So very simple sum. We have parameter A, which is int type, and B also int type, and we're returning an integer because A plus B is going to be an integer, so that's what's happening here. So if I come here inside of main and say sum and pass 12 and 12 as such, and let's put that inside of a print so we can see something. Let's go ahead and run. We can see 24 is showing here. Okay, that's very good. Now, to transform this into a lambda, we do as follow. We say val, as I showed earlier. We can give any name we want for this variable. Sum is fine. For now, let's just say add, just so that we don't have conflict with this sum here. So I'm going to say add. And then we're going to create the type, right? Meaning the types that we're going to be passing as arguments. Also, the type that will be returned. So we put all of that inside of parentheses, at least the parameters. In this case, it's going to be int and int. And then we need to know what is the type we're going to be returning. We do that by actually saying dash and greater than sign like this. And we're going to say int, because that's the type we're going to be returning. And then we say equal. So now we're going to add the actual lambda. So if you go like this, this is the lambda we're talking about here. So what we want to happen here? Well, we need to, of course, receive those values that we're going to be adding together. Those values are going to be, we can say X, we can say D, Y, doesn't matter really. But in this case, we're going to say A, comma, B. Those are the values that we're going to be receiving, and we're going to do something with them, right? I could also specify, say A, int, B, int as such. That is also valid. But if you see, this is a little bit redundant because, as I said, the types that we're passing here are already inferred here. So we don't really need to add the types there also. So I'm going to get rid of those. And next, we're going to say return something. In this case, it's going to be the body. So the body is where we're going to write the actual logic. So in this case, I'm going to say A plus B. And there you have it. So A and B, these represent whatever we're passing as parameters. So think of this as the actual function and the type. In this case, think of that as all of this part here. Okay, so we're saying these are the parameters. This is the type that we're expecting to receive from our lambda. And of course, inside of a parenthesis, this is the lambda, actual lambda. We're going to say pass the value. In this case, it's going to be A and B. We could have put all of that inside like this. So A is going to be the first parameter, and B is the second one. And then we say arrow, and then we have the body. So what is it that we want to do? All right, the result is going to be from A plus B. Very good. So if I come here, I can just say print again and say add like that. And I'm going to go ahead and pass, in this case, 12 and 10. So run. You can see, let's say print ln. That way we have a new line like this. Let's run again. And you can see we have the sum showing 22. So to define a lambda expression is always think in those terms. So we have val, the lambda name. In this case, you can see we said add, that's the lambda name. And then we have colon, and then we have passing the type. So all of this is a type. Now, we will see later that sometimes you don't want to return anything. We'll see later how to return void. Okay, in this case, we pass the types, and then we say equal, and then we pass the parameter list. So in this case, we only have 2 parameters because that's what we specify. But if we had another parameter here, let's say a string, and then that means then here I can pass a string like say C. Okay, this string is never used, then we can actually do other things. But in this case, there it is. So you can see now when you say print add here, it's going to be expecting a string. I'm going to say an empty string or hello. If you run again, you can see nothing really has changed because we haven't really used this string here. That was just an example. So I'm going to just remove this and get rid of this as well. And this. Okay, so we can pass a list of parameters, and then we have the arrow, right? And then we have the code body. So this is the code body here. So as an exercise, I would like you to create a normal function like we did here, sum, and then translate it into a lambda expression. So the function that I would like you to work with is this calculate cat age. So we already have this function here. I want you to transform that into a lambda, just like what we did with add here. Before you go to the next video, go ahead and transform this function into a lambda expression.